You are listening to the Leading Hope Podcast. My name is VJ Williams, here with my friend and pastor, Kevin Jack. We're excited to be with you today. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day to become a better leader. If you're new, welcome. We're so glad to have you. We release a new episode every Wednesday, and you can find us on YouTube, Leading Hope Podcast, and we want you to subscribe to that. Get this automatically downloaded to your favorite device every Wednesday morning. Also, share it with a friend on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And please rate and review on Apple Podcasts. You won't believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of more leaders just like you. Also, share it with your teams. We think it's helpful. We're learning together. They're learning together. It's just a bunch of learning. That's always good. It's always good, man. And visit leadinghope.online to get updates, find out more about the Leading Hope community. Today we continue the series, Elevated Leadership. This is the third one in the series. We're calling this one Clarify and Simplify.
This is going to be a fun one.
Let's go.
I'm excited about this one. So we're in this series talking about how do you level up? How do you make the jump from, man, I want to go from where I am now to where you are. And it's not just steady improvement. There's some massive things that have to jump in there. Our whole idea to this series is it's not simple. It's tricky. But today we're talking about simplicity. And so the goal is clarity. In order for it to be clear, it has to be simple. Okay, so we say it as like, oh, if the goal is clarity, we often fall into a failure as leaders that we go, it's clear to me, so we assume that it's clear to everyone. This is all stuff that we covered in the kind of introduction to this whole series on elevated leadership. We assume if it's clear to me, it's clear to everyone, and that's not the case because you came up with it. You were a part of the building of it. And so the real rubric that you need to go by, the real tool of measurement is it simple? If it is simple, then it can be clear. So let's talk through what needs to be clarified. So I want to give broad categories, and then I want to, this whole episode hinges on a single phrase that I think you're going to hear in your, I hope it's a light bulb moment. I hope it's like, oh, duh. Of course, I get that. You may even just want to turn it off right now and just go run with it and build your own things. Please don't, but if you do, I guess.
I mean, that's kind of the point, so.
At least you're living it out.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So what needs to be clarified? Culture, three things. Culture needs to be clarified. Systems need to be clarified. Growth needs to be clarified. Culture, who are we? What do we value? What are we about? What does it need to feel like? What are the norms? What are the violations? All of these things contribute to culture. We've done extensive talking in the past on culture, what it is, how to create it. But to say it as culture needs to be clarified. People usually view that simply as values. I think that's the most important piece, that it's actually written on paper. This is who we are. This is what matters most to us. I also think violations within your team are helpful, that those are understood and obvious, but that needs to be clarified. Now, if you're thinking this is really simple, it's actually not that simple. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to give the categories. Second piece that needs to be clarified, systems. How do we do what we do? What are the tools, mechanisms, workflows that we use? That needs to be clarified, or maybe better term, those need to be simplified. If they're monumentally complex, they're not going to get done. So it is creating simplicity that is obvious around how are we going to do the work that needs to be done. V, when you first joined team and I first started working with you, you had a really simple tool. Some people may go it's complex, but you used Trello.
Yeah.
Trello is an online task management system that almost functions like a series of Post-it notes that you can communicate. I mean, when you look at the interface, that's not what it is, but that's kind of the functional working model of it, in which you can add people to a project and move it through towards completion. The previous model was email.
Yeah. Which, surprisingly enough, is the model for a lot of organizations, which blows my mind.
Yeah, and email was oh, I never remember what I was supposed to do. There's no way of tracking what I was supposed to do.
No accountability.
I lose it. I delete it. It's gone forever. I have no idea what's happening. And so what Trello did is it created it. At first, there's a little bit of a learning curve for it, but it's I want to be clear. It is a 10-minute learning curve.
Yep.
Is that some people just just say how much people make me laugh? They're like, you adopt like, hey, here's a new task management. I don't want to have to learn a task management system. Like, let me show you my Roblox world that I built of a life-size Magic Kingdom. It's like, take 10 minutes. You can learn the task management system, just to be clear. But it created a far simpler system for task management than the previous one that we were using. And then the other piece is clarifying, creating simplicity around growth. This was the big discussion last time around momentum. Identifying what momentum is, identifying the things that are going to drive growth, not assuming everything we're currently doing is what is leading to that growth, but identifying the key pieces that have to be elevated in terms of quality in order for growth to actually take place. So we've got our 3 categories, okay? We've got culture, we've got systems, how we do what we do, culture, what we value, and growth, which we're really talking about momentum. Now, here's the discussion. If you're going to level up, if you're going to have a greater impact, if you're going to have greater influence, you need to make it simpler. It must be clear and it must be simpler. So this is the problem that comes into play. As your organization larges, the working knowledge of what has happened, is happening, and needs to happen will become diluted. Say it simpler term. The bigger you get, the less people are on the same page in regards to the past, present, and future. If you're 2 people in your office, any event that happens with both of you.
Yeah.
As you move to a small team, it will usually be the team, but like we went out to lunch and this funny thing happened that actually shapes culture because now it's part of our mental memory and what we're aware of. This funny thing that happened, well, you weren't there, so we'll tell you the story. But then you get a team of like 30 people, you don't tell everyone the story. And those are the things that shape culture. And so it's just this simple idea to go, the smaller you are, the more everything is shared. As you grow larger, it becomes a matter of storytelling for those to be aware. And then you get even larger, and now you're on completely different pages and you have completely different experiences. At first, it's just you, and so you make all the decisions. And then this is where it gets really hard. The next step is you have a small team, and you can make a decision in the meeting, and everyone was a part of the decision. And then where it gets complex is that next step where now your team is too large for everyone to be in the meeting.
Right.
And so they weren't a part of the decision, so you have to explain the decision, and you have to be clear enough to explain why, which is the step most people fail because they never had to explain why and the background for decisions before. The point is that as your group grows, as your team grows, as your business grows, as your church grows, the working knowledge of what the past, present, and future is becomes diluted. Not everyone's a part of it, which is what makes things increasingly complex because you have different experiences, different encounters, and different conversations. So here's the key phrase, okay? This is kind of like the important thing that this whole episode talk idea hinges on. The less people are in the know, the more what is in the know needs to become less. Let me say it again. The less amount that people are in the know of what's happening, then you have to change what is considered in the know. That has to become less. And so it is, say it like in 1,000 different categories. Like, this is true of your culture. This is true of your systems. This is true of momentum. You need to reduce down what is considered in the know, essential information, need to know knowledge. You have to deliberately simplify that. That way, the broad base of people who are on your team can remain in the know. It would say, like, if it's just one person, you knew it. If you have a team of 5, it's easier because you'll all become aware in the near future. But as it grows, staying aware becomes increasingly more difficult. So you have to deliberately make it simpler in order for it to remain clear. So let me give you anything on that. We good? Keep running?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so here's your goal, okay? Your goal as you're thinking through this, and some people go, so you need 4 values, or your systems need to be this, or is that, and like sometimes people give numbers or statements like that, and that's not That's not helpful. There is a target that you're looking for, though, as it relates to culture, as it relates to systems, and as it relates to growth or momentum, okay? The target that you are looking for is memorable. You want the working knowledge to be able to be memorized.
Yeah.
They don't have to refer to extensive documentation in order to know who we are, what we're doing, and what's most important in this moment. You want it to be memorable. So just a couple key things. It needs to be easy to understand. It needs to be obvious as to what it is, and it needs to be repeatable. So we're talking like phraseology right there. We're talking about like actually like constructing, engineering a phrase, kind of like the way that I could have easily said, like, hey, as the organization increases, you need to decrease the amount of information so that people stay fully knowledgeable. No. Phraseology goes, when less people are in the know, what is in the know needs to become less. So you're just trying to capture that so that's actually memorable. And so say, like, for each of these areas, for your culture, for your systems, for your momentum, if you're going to level up, that means the size is going to increase. In order for the size to increase, for culture, for systems, for momentum to stay clear, they have to get simpler. And so I would just ask you a couple questions on this, okay? So you go, hey, I want to be there. I want to have that going on. I want to be at that level. Part of this is learning how to lead well so that other people can get a hold of it quickly, making yourself easy to follow because it's simple, because it's clear. So a couple questions I'd ask. In terms of your values, which is the easiest way of defining your culture. Like, first off, we could go, do you have any? Like, are they there? That's an important question. But the other pieces are to go, how many are there? If you have 12 values, it's really hard to remember. I'm not saying 12 values are bad, but I'm saying, like, at a certain point in time, your team's not going to remember that. Yeah. You probably don't even remember all 12, to be clear. How are they repeated? How often are they repeated? Are there stories that are connected to them? And I would say part of the simplicity is going, if you've got 10 values, you can't repeat them every single week, and you can't connect stories to all of them because there's just too many. So reducing that down becomes really important. For strategy, ready? Here's the key question, okay? For like momentum, that's the question there. For strategy, can you draw it? Can you like sit down with a napkin or a piece of paper if you really need it, and can you sketch out your strategy? How this thing connects to this thing and what it has to do at this level? Because I wholeheartedly believe that if you cannot draw your strategy, you do not know your strategy. You're just doing different things. And you go, oh yeah, I could do that. Can your team? Can people as a whole?
Yeah.
Because if they can't sit down and actually go, this is how these different pieces are connected, then it's not simple, which means it's not clear. And so you're looking for memorable, okay? Can you draw your strategy? Vision. Here's the question. If everyone on your team wrote down one paragraph to the question, what are we trying to accomplish? How close would their answers be? Or if you extended that to your organization as a whole, like for pastors, if you asked everyone in your church one week, and I'm not recommending that you do this because it would just frustrate you. If you asked everyone at your church, say, hey, would you do me a favor? Would you get out a piece of paper? Would you write down one paragraph, 4 sentences? Some of you are going to cheat. You're like, it's okay. You can have a 24-sentence paragraph, like 4 sentences. What are we trying to accomplish? How close would their answers match what you've been pursuing in your head? And I'm not saying that your vision is wrong. All I'm saying is it's not clear. And if it's going to be clear, it has to be simpler. And when you're thinking simpler, you're thinking more memorable. And so that is the key. Memorable, 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 because you want it to be clear. In order for it to be memorable, it has to be simple. Complexity is the enemy of culture. Complexity is the enemy of growth. The more complex it is, it may make sense in your head, but if it doesn't make sense to anyone else, that's not good enough. And so it is ridding your organization, ridding your models of unnecessary complexity so people can carry it out simply. I'm reminded of the story, this is in Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, where he talks about when Tony Dungy was the coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which he was wrongfully fired as coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then John Gruden came and inherited that role and took him to the Super Bowl, even though it was really Tony Dungy's team. If I could say that as a side note, just to be clear, some of you are like,
You're getting into it.
why do I care? Because it was Tony Dungy's Super Bowl. But he said that his goal was that he wanted to make that his players didn't even have to think.
Right.
That they did the same thing over and over again, that they could just simply react. And if they could just react, they would be a half second faster their opponents. And that's all the advantage they needed. So he had this incredibly simple playbook, incredibly simple structure and design and all these pieces. And they did it again and again and again and again. And they excelled because of that. And then they fired because they didn't quite get over the hump. And John Gruden, and that's another long story. And John Gruden Raiders and whatever, all those other pieces. So the key. Did I lose you there?
No, I'm with you.
Okay, good.
Wait.
The key in all this is simple so it can be clear and your cue is memorable. V, I took a lot of time.
No, that's good. There's a ton there to break down. Obviously, we're gonna run out of time before we can break out too much of it. Your mind goes straight to menus. Menus in general, not just
Cheesecake Factory.
Just Cheesecake Factory, but like even we've all navigated those websites in which we're just trying to find the product of which we want to pay for and have shipped. Even like you think of not to take this too far down the road, but like car websites for like parts for cars. It's just it's not simple, and people check out.
Yeah,
and we see a society and a culture that is even more susceptible to checking out today than ever before.
Yeah.
And we have to know that if we're going to grow and to do these things. That
small
you've called
attention
out.
spans, instant gratification.
Everything there says to simplify, and that helps us be clear. As you see the church
Oh, that's good.
moving forward,
Yeah.
and as you see what God has called you to do and over your life, over the next 5 years, what's that look like for you moving into a new place? And what is it going to do to you to make sure that you're focused on simplifying and being clear?
Yeah. I've kind of view my role is to go, I can't be good at everything. I
Right.
can't, as we level up and as influence and impact expands, I can't be good at everything. But I better be great at a couple things.
Yeah.
And one of those things that I have to be great at is messaging and clarification. Because if I'm not, like I would say it as, all leadership at the end of the day is communication.
Yeah.
Like that is an essential piece of all leadership. And so if I am not great at communication, and don't hear me as just saying public speaking.
Yeah.
Understanding the ins and outs of communication and how it functions and how it shapes culture and shapes behavior, then I'm at a loss.
Yeah. You talked about, you brought it up, Tampa Bay. Tom Brady, people say he's great.
Oh, you went forward 20 years.
Yeah, great at everything. But he's not, right? Like if I hand Derrick Henry the ball and I tell Tom Brady to tackle Derrick Henry,
that's good.
He's losing. He's losing that
Yeah.
battle. But he's great at most of the things that he needs to be great at. So that's basically what you're saying at the end of the day. You better figure those out and make it happen.
Yeah. And I think there's like so we talk about it from a leadership standpoint. We say like there's some real simple tests to understand if it's clear. And we never use these tests.
Yeah.
Like the test of your team is the game.
Yep.
Like in sports. The test of your academics is the test. I know there's a whole other thing and people get mad about that. But like it is application of knowledge, maybe if I could say it more like that, is the test. The test of your leadership is clarity.
Yes.
And clarity you can do this in advance so you're not frustrated. You can go through and go, hey, what are our values?
Yeah.
And if you don't know our values, it's not on you, it's on me. What's our strategy? If you can't draw it, it's not on you, it's on me.
And I think that's the most powerful thing from this whole episode is that at the end of the day, if you're leading a team of people, volunteers, staff, whatever, we've got to be able to write down in a graph form. It says this leads to this, and then this is the outcome.
Yes.
And we have to do, like everyone should be, I'm even thinking in my own way today, like what have I done that makes sense to me that doesn't make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
And what do I need to change? And how do I move forward and make it more simple and less complex? If one thing before we go, I think this would be helpful. If church, organization, corporate world, if you walked in, what is one of the obvious things you would tell someone they would need to change right away? Is communication, Like, what are, because there's, you've read enough and you've had enough experience.
Yeah.
Right away when you walk in to an organization, hey, this thing right here, we know we've got to make this more simple.
Oh, well, I think the easiest one that is often most neglected, and I don't know if this is the strategy piece.
Yeah.
They don't most people don't understand how all the things that they're doing contribute to the whole.
That's
They
great.
think that it does, but they don't know how, and you have to know how.
Until they have to have someone explain it, which
Yes.
is great. That's so good. Thank you for joining us. Is there anything you wanted to leave us with?
Let me just give that phrase again.
Yeah.
So, if when less people are in the know, what is in the know needs to become less. That's how you ensure clarity over time.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're new to the podcast and haven't yet subscribed, it would mean the world to us if you did that now. Also, post about it, rate and review. You won't believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of more leaders just like you. Also, share it with your teams. And we'd love to hear your stories of how the podcast is working in your life and business. If you have a story, head out to leadinghope.online. Click that Contact Us link and send that to us. We would love to hear from you. And remember, everyone has 20 minutes to learn to become a better leader. Make it count.